Hello, everybody. This is the Wasaic Project's first featured artist talk for our show currently up in Maxon Mills. The title is All Out, All In. It's up through the end of March. Our first featured artist talk is with Natalie Baxter. I got the point the right direction. Natalie Baxter is currently an artist in residence in Wasaic, and she has been an artist in residence here a total of 3 times, if I'm not mistaken. It's 3, not 4 at this point, right? 3. And she has been featured in no less than 4 of her exhibitions. More broadly, her work explores concepts of place identity, nostalgic Americana, and gender stereotypes through sculptures that playfully push controversial issues. Natalie received her MFA from the University of Kentucky in 2012 and a BA in Fine Art from the University of the South in Sewanee, Tennessee in 2007. Her work has been exhibited in galleries and museums internationally, with recent shows at Intersect SFA Chicago with Elijah Wheat Showroom, Birmingham Museum of Art, Spring Break Art Show with Gloria's, Material Art Fair with Beverly's, Institute 193, Yale University, and Brandeis University. She has also been a fellowship recipient at the Vermont Studio Center and twice awarded the Queen's Art Fund grant. Press for her work includes the New York Times, the Boston Globe, Hyperallergic, The Guardian, and Bomb Magazine. I should also note that this talk was made possible in part with funding from the Queen's Council of Arts. We're very thankful for their support.
Yeah.
Before we jump in, just a few logistical things. This talk is going to start with a 20 to 30 minute talk by Natalie, and then after that point, we'll have plenty of time for a Q&A session. Before the Q&A section, we'll run over like how we're going to handle unmuting so that we're not all talking over one another. But yeah, Natalie, why don't you take it away?
Sure. Thanks. Thank you, Joe. And thank you, Wasaic Project. And thank you, everybody, for coming on a Friday evening. I appreciate it. I'm going to share my screen. I have a short little presentation of going into talking about all of the series that are in, that are up in the show right now in the mill. Sorry. Didn't mean to do that. Present. Okay, everybody can see this? Yeah. So I have a presentation of the work and the series that I have that's up in the show right now in the mill, which is actually where I am right now and where Joe is. Joe's in a separate part. I'm over in the studio part because I'm doing a residency with the Wasaic Project, a 7-month residency, which has been really wonderful to be up here, and I'm very appreciative. And so I'm starting out by saying thank you to the Wasaic Project, and as Joe mentioned, the Queen's Council on the Arts. I got a new works grant from the Queen's Council on the Arts to do some of the work, the Housecoat series that I have one piece in this show, and I'm going to show you some other pieces from that series too. If you live in Queens, which I think some of you do that are on the Zoom call, you should apply for this grant. It's great. Okay, anyway, I like to start out a lot of my talks with this photo because this is my grandmother. She's no longer with us, but she is a woman who taught me everything about quilting and sewing. So this is the first quilt that we made together. And so a lot of the work that I do kind of stems from lessons that I learned from her, but also, yeah, more that I'll talk about later, especially this series, which is a housecoat series that I did. So this is the second one that I made. This is the one that's up in the mill right now. And I started thinking about housecoats, and I would love, when we get to the comment section or the Q&A section, I would love to hear what you guys think about, like what comes to mind when you think of a housecoat. For me, my grandmother, the one that I showed in the first slide, she was a homemaker. So she did a lot of like cooking and cleaning. She raised 3 children. She did a lot of gardening and sewing and quilting. So when she was home, she would put on a housecoat as sort of this homemaker workwear. So like, all right, we're going to be sitting around here quilting all day. Like, do you want to put on a housecoat? So that's kind of, I like thought a lot about housecoats and my grandmother when I had my daughter. So you're like, after you have a kid, especially if you're like breastfeeding, you're like kind of half naked all day anyway, or you're like in a robe, just kind of lounging around. All of a sudden you're very like in this domestic space, which is interesting because we're all kind of thrown into this domestic sphere right now because of the pandemic. But yeah, I started thinking about like this house coat as this garment of a homemaker workwear, like you put on and you do your homemaker things. So I knew I wanted to do something with the house coat in my work at I guess like a year and a half ago. And I finally I played around a couple of times with kind of making this flat, almost like a quilt version of a house coat that was stretched over a stretcher. I didn't really like it at all. I wasted like, well, I wouldn't say wasted, but I spent a couple months making this work that I then never showed. And I finally came to this realization of why don't I make a physical, actual coat, like a giant, oversized sculpture of a coat. So this is the first one that I made. These are the same piece. So I chose the materials that I chose to do this with are, you see this baby quilt. I don't know if some people recognize Sunbonnet Sue. This is like a baby quilt, classic baby quilt. There's this double wedding band quilt, which is a pattern that you would make for somebody who's getting married. And then there's this t-shirt that I'm sure you guys recognize, like something that you would wear over your bathing suit. Maybe, you know, you're at the beach, but it's kind of like this facade of this sexy woman bathing suit, sexy body in a bikini. And then also some other materials that are in there are like, if you can notice this, can you guys see my cursor? Probably. A receiving blanket. So like when you have a baby in the hospital, they wrap your baby up in this blanket and so it's kind of this classic, lots of hospitals, I think all around the world use this blanket. And then also like clothes that don't fit me anymore, or yeah, so a lot of like found materials went into this house coat. So the like what I'm thinking about with this series is kind of these different facades and these different roles that you wear as at this time thinking about like becoming a mother and having this small child, and these different um, kind of like roles that you place on yourself, but also these sort of like pressures or these like, yeah, facades, like this like t-shirt thing, and how they're sort of overwhelming and can be all consuming. So that's, I created these like giant house coats that they kind of like swallow the person up if they're wearing them. So this is the one in Wasaic project. This is another one that was at this show here in Newburgh at the Elijah Wheat Showroom. And this one I chose to hang on a hanger, but I think this kind of lost the very human aspect of it, the bodily aspect of it. So I played around too with presenting them on mannequins, like this one that's in the back right now in my studio. I actually just finished this one today and did this little photo shoot in Wasaic. So this one, as you can see, I'm using a lot of fringe, using a lot of found quilts, and again this like bathing suit t-shirt. And this is actually a Halloween costume that I made for my daughter. But I kind of wanted to show that I use this this fringe thing right here. I kind of pulled that from making a Halloween costume. So yeah, those are my house coat series. I'd love to hear what other people think of when they think of house coats, because I also think that there's a lot going on with like now being everybody being homebound and being sort of hanging out in loungewear a lot, and there's a lot of issues of class and like who has this comfort and this privilege to be kind of staying at home and working from home and being in a home space, and who has to, you know, go out and work in the grocery store or like be on kind of the front lines or of this pandemic and like working in, you know, grocery stores or restaurants and all that. So I think that there's a lot there, and this is kind of like a new thing that I've been working on, and the way that I kind of work through figuring out what it is that I'm like it's like what I want to say with the work is different than what the work will say. You know what I mean? Like, I have the ideas, but does it portray out in the work? It's kind of like I don't have a lot of control over that. But so I would love to hear your feedback on what you think when you see house coats and when you see this work. Okay, so another series that's hanging up in the mill right now, which was I started here at Wasaic Project, and it was very much pandemic related, pandemic inspired, I guess. So on the left here, that quilt that I showed you in the very first slide, that is a quilt that my grandmother and I made that won first place at the Letcher County Homemakers Club. So this was an organization that was founded through the University of Kentucky like 100 years ago to kind of reach out to rural women in Eastern Kentucky to help them share things like canning or, you know, cleaning, like different homemaker kind of like skills, I guess. And now, or what it was 10 or 15 years ago when I went with my grandmother with our quilt, it's kind of like a bunch of usually older women sitting around and helping each other quilt, helping them like finish quilts, and then also kind of like, you know, catching up on the gossip and what's happening in the county. So I always had this ribbon, Letcher County Homemakers Club, and I was like, I want to make some of my own ribbons. So I first like replicated this homemakers ribbon, and then I started thinking about what it means to be a homemaker right now and what it means to be like in the midst of here we are in this pandemic, and we're having a mass amount of people losing their jobs, predominantly women. Like there's some article that came out, I think it was in CNN, it was like in December 14,000 people lost their jobs, and all of them were women, all of that amount of jobs lost. And also just like talking to my friends who have kids who are in this partnership where their husband usually makes more money than them, so when it comes, and then their children are out of school, when it comes down to like caring for their children, financially it makes more sense for the woman to leave their job. And just the pressures. I mean, I saw a lot of kids in this Zoom call. I'm sure you guys understand this pressure too. It's like of like the burden of all of this labor that's happening at home that that's like piling up, I guess. So I started thinking about all of the tasks that you've like that people have had to take on, and kind of thinking about a way to congratulate them or encourage them for like being a short order cook. So like you have a kid, you're making food for that child, you're making food for like you and your partner, you're making, you know, you're washing an insane amount of dishes because you're not going out to eat anymore, you're first place multitasker. So these roles that like predominantly women have had to take on during the pandemic, and kind of this like this congratulatory, like you're doing a good job. But I also think there's this element of competitiveness that's there, that especially I think like social media breeds this, but also just like in talking to other mom friends or other like mom groups, or I'm just speaking from my own experience in this, but it's like the desire to do the best and be the best. So these like ribbons of kind of yeah, like exploring a lot of that. So I made these ribbons, and then I kind of like decided that I needed to make this other house coat to go along with these ribbons to kind of like interact in the show that's at Wasaic. So this is an install shot from the show, from the 5th floor, from All Out, All In. And when Wasaic approached me to be in the show, they were like, "We want to show your quilts." And I was like, in the back of my mind, I always wanted to show these at some point in a gallery, but I didn't expect it to happen so soon. So that's really fun. But I make these quilts, and it's an interesting conversation because I always see them as not as my work, but I see them as sort of this other thing that I do between creating new work, which I think is kind of messed up that I think that, but I like to kind of explore what that means. So these are all from scraps from other projects. So like I did this series of guns and I had lots of leftover fabric from that, or I guess everything I do has been fabric. So it's like a lot of scraps from other projects I'll turn into a quilt and kind of use that as a time to kind of work through an idea, because you're just like keeping your hands busy while you're creating other things. So yeah, there's something there to be definitely to be explored, where like, why do I not consider this art? For like, why does this, like, is it because it has less of a concept than my other work? Is it because they're quilts, because they're a useful object? Is it because it's traditionally women's work? Anyway, maybe that's my own hang up, but I love that they asked me to show these quilts in conversation with kind of the other work that I've shown. So here's 2 more install shots of those quilts. And most of these I made during the pandemic as kind of like a got to keep my hands busy, but I don't know what to do right now kind of mentality, which I'm sure people can relate to, especially artists in this room. So yeah, some quilts. And then this piece is also in the show, so maybe some of you have seen it, but maybe not. Also, this space is an old mill, if you've never been to Wassaic. So as you saw from the last couple photos, the rooms are very unique and kind of interesting. But this one, you kind of walk up and you're confronted with this giant gold flag that's sort of draped across. I think it looks very coffin-like. And then kind of you would take a left and you would see this house coat and these ribbons. So in that way, I think by draping this gold flag, I mean, we're in the midst of this pandemic where like now millions of people have died. I think like, and sort of because of poor decisions that have been made from our government. I think that you could read into this like that. I think also it's kind of, yeah, it's like, to me, I that's how I kind of read this piece, but not everybody does. Like some people were like, oh, I don't read it that way. And then someone else was like, whoa, that gold flag coffin up there, it's interesting. But this is that same piece. It's this giant gold American flag. This is it in another show where it was kind of slouched over. And this is from a series of bloated flags that I made. Actually, I started this series at Wassaic Project the very first time that I did the residency. So I guess 4 years ago. I've started a lot of series here, actually. So that's great. But this one, so this was actually made a lot of these gold flags, and they're all called "People Will Think You're Making a Trump Flag." And that was from a comment that somebody, when doing a studio visit, I was explaining about this previous body of work that I did about, that was these soft guns, these like fabric droopy guns. And I don't think she quite understood what, like, that series kind of like walks this line of like America's fascination with gun culture and like they're cute and cuddly and kind of using comedic elements and humor to enter into something that's more complicated to talk about and more divisive. And then she saw that I was making these gold flags. She's like, you need to be careful because people will think you're making a Trump flag. That was pre-Trump even being the candidate or being elected. So yeah, playing with that kind of like ambiguity of like, am I making a Trump flag? I don't know. What is she doing? This is a old roommate for scale and a baby for scale. And then another series that's in the show is these eagles. They're called the Squad. So these are, again, a lot of my work deals with these patriotic imagery. So like guns, flags, quilts are very kind of Americana. And so I wanted to play around with these statues of eagles. So I saw a lot of them in Queens. When you'd walk around my neighborhood in Queens, there was like these, statues outside of somebody's fence. There's even one actually out the window here in Mosaic, like a cement eagle, guarding the house. And so I wanted to kind of play around with these statues that you would buy to kind of like put on or here's some like on a fence, or like an eagle in the back of a pickup truck, or these statues that you would put on your law office desk or on your mantle. So I took these ones that you'd actually buy to do that, and then kind of gold spray painted them, put glitter, painted their fingernails, kind of bedazzled them. So I like them how they're kind of like standing, like this one's kind of standing guard, and there's another one hidden in one of the rafters over here that's kind of like surveillance camera-esque in my mind. So yeah, here's some more of the eagles. And then that's kind of all the work that's in the show. I have a few more kind of installation shots from other shows. Should I go through those, Joe, or do you think that we should open up to some questions?
You should absolutely go through this. We'll open up for questions in just a few minutes, but we have plenty of time left for Q&A. It's
Okay,
only 5:23.
cool. All right, so here's some, this is from a show earlier this year in January, or I guess early last year, January. So this is incorporating a lot of the series of works that I have. There's that gold flag again, kind of draped over like a coffin. This was a show at the Spring Break Art Fair. So this was literally the weekend before New York City just shut down, which is crazy because it was like art fair weekend and everybody was mingling around and kissing each other's cheek and touching each other, and remember that. So anyway, this is the series of guns that I did, and I turned them into kind of a gun show, like a table that you would go to if you went to an actual gun show. This is an installation of, I can talk about this other series too when I get there, but of the flags, guns, and then this alt cap series that I think I have some photos of too we can talk about. This is actually the same space that my work is in right now on the 5th floor at the Wassaic Project. This is a bloated flag that was cut up and hung in sections that is referencing this Benjamin Franklin political cartoon, Join or Die. So it's this cut up snake. This piece, my flag, is called Severed and Growing. So it's kind of like, it's predominantly reddy pink colors on one side, blues and purples on the other, and it's sort of like severed and growing. Are we growing apart? Are we growing back together? It's been kind of an intense week to debate that still. And here's that same piece hanging at Smackmelon, which is a gallery in Brooklyn. And this was such a great, I thought this was a great space for this piece with these giant columns. So here's on the left, you can see the predominantly blue patchwork piece. This is another bloated flag, America Current Mood. This was made when Trump was elected, a couple days after. Another install shot of the guns. And then this work is actually really interesting now that I'm about to talk about. I don't know, I thought about it a lot in the past week. So I made a bunch of guns, and then this Glenn Beck's website, The Blaze, he has this news and entertainment website called The Blaze, wrote this article about me called Feminist Artist Takes on Toxic Masculinity by Making Soft Sculptures, Impotent Sculptures of Guns. So the gist of this article was like, look at this woman in Brooklyn making these sculptures of guns. Isn't it so ridiculous? And then the comments section of that article had like 95 comments that were all questioning my gender, my sexuality, my mental state. So some of them were like pretty lighthearted comments, like just a soft-headed snowflake. This chick needs a good railing. That's art. See folks with shrooms and LSD do to the head. And then this one kind of really summed it up for me. Clearly, Natalie Baxter is confused about her role as a woman. So I made a couple of those because that was really like, I was this same kind of energy of that I was exploring with gun ownership at the warm gun work was like, what's up with these pretty much like, what's up with these dudes with guns? And then like this same energy was then spit back at me through these comments. So I turned them into these banners that sort of echo suffragist banners, these like women 100 years ago who were fighting for equality and would make these quilted banners. But here they are taking internet rhetoric and putting them on, like sewing them on banners. Which is like what made me think about it in the last week is like how all this rhetoric online kind of manifested into this physical act on attacking the Capitol, and how like the past 4 years we needed to take that more serious. I guess like it was always like kind of funny and kind of um like I mean, felt threatening. Like, yes, these comments felt threatening. Some of these comments were like, this girl should kill herself for making gun sculptures. Like, it's kind of ridiculous. But like here we are dealing with this in an actual physical, really scary way, you know? So like Trump giving light, I think this all kind of plays into like Trump giving light to people to act this way and to feel like they can express themselves in this like, yeah, this rhetoric. But also, a woman being attacked on the internet is nothing new, and I'm not very special for having been attacked on the internet by internet trolls. But yeah, so interesting time. Here's some suffragist photos. And some more. Democrats just want to be sluts and burn your bra, baby. And this one says, just a man-hating feminazi with no redeemable qualities, not to mention no brain. Yeah, I guess I ended on that. So yeah, that series, it's interesting now. But here we are. This is where you can find me on the internet. There's my website and my Instagram. But I'd love to hear your all's thoughts or questions or anything.
Thank you, Natalie. We are gonna, yes, hop over to the Q&A section right now so that we don't have a ton of people talking over one another, because there are 64 of you in this call. We are going to use the hands raised function of feature of Zoom to manage people's questions. So if you have a question, click the like hands raised button. It should be in the like bottom bar when you're hovering over your Zoom screen. And that will signal to me that you have a question, and then I will tell people to come off of mute so that we have one person at a time off of mute. But before we do that, we actually have a few questions, Natalie, already queued up in the chat from people. So while you were talking about the house coats, Anna MQN said that when I think of house coats, I think about generational differences between women who would have worn house coats, our mothers and grandmothers, and moms of young children today. Do you feel that there is a new appreciation and respect for homemaking, quote unquote, now that so many are at home?
Yeah, so I think about that a lot too. I forgot to mention that. Because I would see this, well, first of all, because I got the idea from my grandmother wearing house coats, but also like walking around in Queens and Brooklyn, seeing older women in house coats, like sweeping their front porch area or their front sidewalk. Yeah, and I think a lot about how, like, in a lot of ways, my life is not very different than like my grandmother's generation. Like, I am, especially now, like we're home a lot, where I have a child that I'm like helping raise. I'm doing a lot of cooking, a lot of cleaning, and I'm literally quilting and sewing all day. You know, like that's also kind of why it's funny, that comment, like clearly confused about her role as a woman. It's like, I'm literally like I'm pretty sure I'm like doing the traditionally housewifey things. But the difference, I think about this a lot, like the difference is like I've chosen this path. Like I've made this my career. I get to like, I'm here giving this talk. You know, like this is a path that I've chosen and that I've been able to choose because people have fought for gender equality or fought for, you know, for women to be in the workplace, which is why it's a little bit scary and a little bit worrisome that the pandemic is, I like fear that it's going to be women in the workplace, like taking a step back because so many have had to drop out because of childcare duties. So really, just like everything else in the past couple of years, we've learned that the system is not built for women and for mothers, and it needs to be, we got to fix it all, like, so yes, generational. I think that there's a lot there. What else? Yeah, I'd love to hear other people's thoughts about house coats or other questions.
We actually had a few more questions queued up in
Okay.
the chat. Let me go to the next one. So Megan Smith is asking, can you talk a little bit more about the comical and playful aspect of your work? You mentioned that it was a way for viewers to enter the work, but can you talk more about that absurdity and goofiness?
Yeah. So I think that the guns are a very good example of this kind of like, what I say is kind of like the Mary Poppins approach of a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. So when you're confronted with something that is made from familiar materials, like we all have fabric in our houses, we all interact with that, we're wearing it on our bodies, it's a familiar thing. Even the act of quilting, people always come up to me after talks and say like, oh, like my grandmother quilts or my aunt taught me how to do this, or like, here, look at this quilt that I've been making. So like that aspect of it is very familiar. And then soft sculpture it's funny. It's like comical. It invokes this childlike toy, and especially like the colorful flamboyant fabrics that I use. They're very playful. So I think that when you enter into something that might be polarizing, if you're entering in it through this lens of humor and kind of playfulness, then you're more willing to like hear it out or see it out. Like a good example, I had a show in Kentucky, in Lexington, where I'm from, and I was in this gallery space. It was a gallery filled with guns, and these two older women walked in. They didn't know I was the artist, and they're like, "Oh, these are so cute. They're so colorful. Oh, look at this," like. And they were kind of quiet. And this one woman was like, well, I live on a farm and I have a gun. And I think that I have a right to have a gun. And the other woman's like, yeah, but we don't need these assault rifles. This is getting ridiculous. Like, I think that we need to ban those. So it's like, because you're entering in through this, like art has this ability to kind of put you in that mindset to where maybe you're able to have these conversations that maybe those women would have had otherwise, but maybe not.
Great, thank you. There are a few people with their hands raised, but we still have questions from like a few minutes ago queued up. So there's not technically a question here, but these are some really good notes that I think you'll have some interesting responses to, Natalie. Julia Norton, hi Julia, said that the quilts make me think of the process being the quote unquote work versus the product, using the leftovers of past projects and processing them in a different way or recycling them can be an interesting thing to consider as the content of the work other than what they appear to be, which is of course beautiful. Also taking into account what you are listening to or watching or whatever stimuli you are taking in the act of making. So I can see it almost more like a performance or a documentation than an object. So I guess to tack on a follow-up question to that, can you talk a little bit about like how the quilts in particular fit into your process alongside the other series of work you're making? And then also another side question, like what does time in the studio generally look like for you? Are you listening to music? Are you watching? What are the stimuli that are in the studio with you?
Yeah. So it's funny because the quilts I don't usually make in my studio. I'll make the top part. A quilt is like a sandwich. Actually, I buy a lot of quilt tops from eBay. So this is one that I just bought from eBay. It's really beautiful. But anyway, this is a quilt top. So it's a piece together, like the different pieces are pieced together. So I do that part. If I make a quilt, I do this part in the studio, and usually just because of space purposes, like I'll lay it out on the floor, look at it, piece it together. And then the sandwich part is there's like a quilt. The floor of my studio is like such a mess, so I can find anything on there. But anyway, this is batting. So this is like the middle part, and then there's a bottom part, like a layer of fabric that you then quilt all three together. So it's like a sandwich. So the actual act of quilting, if I make a quilt, I do it at home. So that's kind of like I can do it like as I'm watching TV, or like sitting around with my family, or like anywhere in the car, drive, like if I'm a passenger. So I see that work as kind of like a mental break from other work. So if I finish a series or finish a body of work, then I'm like, okay, I'm going to take a break. I'm done with that, or like I'm done for that for a while, or I need to take a break. And it's sort of like it's a mental break, and it's also a way of thinking through a new idea, if that makes sense. And Julia is an amazing natural dyist, Julia Norton. We're talking about making quilts together. She dyes some fabric and I quilt it. So check out her work.
Yes, Julia is also a Mosaic Project alum herself.
Yeah.
Anyway, I want to give people a chance to ask the questions who have had their hands raised for a while. I believe I saw Catherine Thomas with her hand raised first, so feel free to take yourself off mute and ask your question, Catherine.
Hi, Natalie. Can you guys hear me okay?
Hi. I can't see you, but I can hear you.
Here, I'll start my video.
Oh, no, you don't have to start video. Okay. Oh, hey.
Hello, everybody else. Okay, I love your house coats. I just wanted to say they're fabulous. And the associations I have with house coats are like comfort, safety, healing, because I always wear mine like the entire time when I'm sick. I've got Crohn's. And so it's like my comfort space is like putting on my house coat. Yeah. So my question is about making soft sculptures, because I'm a weaver and I've shown at professional galleries, but I feel drawn to soft sculpture, but I'm not sure if like galleries and curators are receptive to collecting it. I have followed you for a long time. I love everything you do. And I think that you're so successful in making these iconic pieces that carry weight, but like are a little comical and a little silly and a little like lighthearted. Is there something that you could suggest to the artist of the world that you would say is like a good idea to focus on when you're wanting to sell soft sculpture and things like, weavings and textiles and quilts professionally?
I mean, I think that the best work that you're going to make is work that you're obsessed with making, that you're like, so you should just make some stuff and see what happens, play around with it. Like don't think about selling it or how it's going to sell, or if it's going to sell, because what you make, well, first of all, you want to be obsessed with what you're making. Like that's
Sure.
so fun. That's the best. And it'll come out in what you make, like, if that makes sense. So don't think about who will buy it or anything like that. Just play and do it and
Definitely. That's when the best ideas come, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
But
Thank
yeah,
you.
I don't think I mean, I don't have any experience with not showing soft sculpture stuff in gallery situations, but people have been really receptive to
Right.
the work. I think just, yeah, if you love making the work and the work is good, then if you build it, they will come.
For sure. Thank you, Natalie. I appreciate it.
And thank you for your kind words.
Okay, Libby Paloma, you also have your hand raised. Feel free to take it off. And yep, you figured it out.
Hey, I got it. Hi. So I encountered your work at the mill. I was in residency there a little bit ago, and I saw one of your flags, your bloated flags, and the eagle with the nails painted.
Yeah.
And, yeah, and then have since looked at your work and stuff, and just find it. Well, okay, so initially when I approached it, since you're asking for feedback or whatever, I approached it and I was really excited by it because of the materials that you use. They're glittery and textural, and I want to lay in them, I want to touch them, all of that definitely happens when you encounter them. I would say in particular in a space like the mill, because the backdrop of that is kind of very creepy, and so the disconnect between the softness of and the sort of excitement of the fabric and then the like almost haunted backdrop of the mill is like this really unique place to have them exist is like, I don't know. I was thinking about like, are they also part of this? Are they like could they be some kind of like time traveling, like to a better time, to a different time, a portal, you know, sort of my imagination gets going. Like when I come across these sort of glittery things, these unique soft sculptures, you know? And then yeah, so going back to like that playful, that like humorous thing that like working with fabric, in particular making soft sculptures, is really it's fun initially, you know. And so anyway, so that was what I thought of when I but also you know, I'm queer, and so I also wondered, oh, is this like a nod to like the queer community? Is this sort of, you know, because it was like this sort of moment of like the glitter and the spectacular and things that can often be sort of associated with queer culture. And so like I was like excited and thinking like maybe was that a part of the work too. But in hearing you talk about like the house coat and stuff, so I'm Mexican American, and I actually don't have, but my family has been in this country many generations, and I actually don't have any background with the house coat. So this was like a really interesting and I wondered, was this particular to, like, was this like a sort of like in white culture, particularly? I don't know like what your particular background is. Is this like Southern? Is this, but I just started thinking anyway. And then so I sort of also rudely texted my Nana, who's really good with texting. And she said that she has had a house coat before, but that you wear it after the shower and then you get into your clothes because you have to go.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was kind of interesting, thinking about this sort of being related to class, you know, being sort of, you know, and then how class and race are so tied in this country, right? And thinking about, you know, how I think your work can be really interesting in that the playfulness of it and stuff really does have this, it creates this moment of critiquing perfection, you know, the perfection that I think a lot of like cis white hetero women in middle class, maybe America, but I think now sort of everyone, with the development of consumer culture and capitalism sort of running away with like our democracy and social everything, right? So I think, so I wondered, like, was that a part of it too? Is it also this critique of perfection, this of perhaps perfection of the cis white ideal, if you know, amongst
Yeah.
yeah, like
Thank you.
ideal in big quotes, right? You know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that, thank you for all of that. That's really great. I love that you texted your Nana and asked her.
Sorry, very rude.
And also, yeah, but if your question about like different cultures. I've noticed a lot of like Italian women in someone's nodding their head. I've noticed like a very big in Italian culture, and then an Irish woman came to this show that I had a house coat, and she was like, "Oh, I like this." Like, I immediately knew what this was, and she was telling me how like it used to be every like kind of like homemaker woman would wear one in a home, and it was kind of this like thing that like everybody had, and then as like maybe 80 years ago or something, and then as more women would kind of enter the workforce, or like we're going more into the workforce, that they like kind of shunned the house coat. So I thought that was kind of interesting to hear. But yeah, this like the flashiness of these fabrics, like the glitter and especially that one that you saw in the mill, that house coat, like the back of it is all of that used to have some of it around here. Anyway, the back is all this really thick sequin, long sequin. So yeah, I'm like in that way, I'm kind of playing with these different. This is all stemming from like my personal feelings of this, but like I think that this is sort of universal of like, wanting to like dress up and be flashy, or like, but also wanting to like comfort, like be all the things that kind of like encompass a person, but also this like these different sort of like, yeah, facades or identities that you would wear. And then like this oversizedness of kind of like it weighing you down, but also kind of like hugging you in. Yeah, there's a lot there to think about. And I don't know if it comes across fully, or if that's just what's in my head. But thank you for all that.
Thanks, Natalie. We have another question from someone who's been waiting a while. Their hands raised button wasn't working because not all Zoom meetings are made the same, or Zoom downloads people have. So Van Worth, if you are there, yep, take yourself off mute and ask your question.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Natalie.
Hi.
Thanks so much for hosting or participating in this talk. I've been an admirer of your work for a long time and really one day would love to have a gun wall in my home. And I want to clear something up for everybody who's in the US. I'm not wearing a mega hat. It looks like I'm wearing a mega hat, and I understand the red is a bit of a statement these days, but it's actually a hat for mental health. So no mega hats here. You may already have commented on this, and I just missed it because I was out tending to my barking dogs. But I'm curious about the chain piece behind your head. There's a gold chain.
Oh yeah. I made that a while ago, and it's kind of just been coming with me to every studio. But I don't know, I like it. Actually, no, I have shown it one time. I made this like paper mache truck nuts. Do you know what truck nuts are? They're like
Oh yes.
I did make this piece. I made one with like rubber truck nuts and this chain. So it's kind of this like ball, like very kind of tongue-in-cheek ball and chain. But I also made a giant version with that. So I guess I did show it once at a gallery. But yeah, it just floats around with me to different studios. So I brought it here and I was like, all right, I'm gonna hang it up, I guess. But yeah.
Did you actually make the nuts as well?
Yeah, it's just gold fabric. The nuts. I have a smaller piece that's actually rubber truck nuts from this place called the Chrome Palace that's in Pennsylvania. That we like a truck stop. But then I also made a paper mache giant version of them for the show, and that was the chain that was with the giant version.
Wow.
Yeah. I always
Awesome.
want to do stuff with paper mache, and then it never fully happens, but yeah.
I love your work. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks for that.
We have a few more questions from a few minutes ago, or I guess 15 minutes ago now, in the chat. So Anya Bliss asked or said that you spoke about how you interpreted your work in comparison to how some other people thought about it and interpreted it differently. Is allowing the viewer to interpret your work in a personal way, so there's not one solid meaning, something you hope to achieve, or would you rather portray one meaning?
I would definitely like to. Okay, so you have no control over. I would not like to convey one meaning. I don't. Okay. It's like I have my own set of experiences and what I've learned and what I've seen that like I bring into my work, but everybody else has whatever they've experienced, whatever they've learned, whatever they've seen that they come to to view the work. I think like the guns are a good example of that. I have people who love guns who are like, I like these, like I want to own one of these. And then I have people who like see the kind of droopiness of them, and kind of find them comical in like a critique on gun culture. And I love that kind of ambiguity of like the viewer bringing to them what they feel to the work, if that makes it their own interpretation. And I don't think as an artist you have that much control over how your work is seen. And you can see this in artists who have made work, say 50 years ago, and how it kind of like comes into recontextualize in a new era, or takes on a new meaning in the future. You know what I mean? So you have little control. You make what you make, and you have the intentions of what you think that the work is about, and what you want to convey, I think, to the viewer. But they're always approaching your work from a different experience. That's what I think.
Great, thank you. We still have a few more questions, Natalie, and we are nearing 6 p.m. So I want to
All right.
make sure we get to everything. So Lexi has another question that's been in the chat for a while. She says, "Hi Natalie, love your work. I was curious if/how your race plays into your work, especially with the rise of Black Lives Matter movements in 2020. Has anything shifted with how you view your work, particularly since it explores identity so much?"
Yeah, I mean, I think that everybody is like going through it. Yeah, I mean, that it not only in my work, it made me rethink my life. You know, the past year has been yeah, just like how I take up space in the world, and how the art world, like, is it I don't know, is the art world very fair? What can I do as one person to yeah, I mean, but yeah, have I thought about it in terms of my work? Yes. But I don't know exactly how. Yeah, I don't know. It's a tricky. It's like, in one way I'm coming from I can only speak to what I know and what my experience is, but being open and to like being aware and open to like how the work is perceived, or how it's shown, or where it's shown, or like, I think a lot too about opportunity, like opportunity hoarding, and like yeah, like, if that makes sense. I don't know, if that answers your question, but yeah, definitely.
Great, thank you. We have another question from a while back. Janet Lauren Hill said that my grandma felt the most genuine in her house coat. She was someone who continued to get her hair done twice a week when she was really sick, but when she was in her house coat, she was just being. Question for Natalie is, it's really curious to hear how you contend with misreadings and misconstructions of the intention or meaning of your work. Do you feel like the risk of that misread is actually essential to the work? Would you be excited about a work that wasn't able to be misread? Thank you for the wonderful talk. It's slightly similar to the question you asked before, but I like the misreading dimension there, and wonder if you have thoughts on that.
So wait, where's this question? I want to read it, or I want to.
It is in the chat from 5:37 p.m.
Okay.
It's, yeah.
Oh yeah, I love that, how your grandmother put it on, just felt like she was being herself. The risk of being misread is actually essential to the work. Yeah, I think with a lot of my work, I like that. Yeah, that kind of like what I talked about before. Like, I like that ambiguity, and I like that like line of. But you know, I've thought about this a lot in the past week of because I feel like a lot of my stuff is like, I don't want to preach to the choir, and I don't want to. I like that, like, walking the partisan line, and there's been a lot of conversation in the past week of like, should we be doing that? You know, like, should we be like calling for unity right now if there's no accountability? You know, like, so I've thought about that in terms of my work. So I'm like, why am I here trying to like not like please both sides, but kind of like understand both sides, or like speak to both sides? When I say both sides, I'm kind of talking politically, like because of the work that I do kind of deals with a lot of hot button political and social issues. But yeah, I've kind of thought about that a lot lately of like, and I think our country is kind of thinking about that a lot right now of like, what do we do? What are we, why can we really, can we see eye to eye? And is that what we should be doing without like holding people accountable first and then fixing problems later? I don't know. That's kind of like a way bigger picture question than just about my work is what that's kind of what I've been thinking.
Great, thank you. It is 5:58, but I still want to get to people's questions who have already asked them or lined up. So we're going to end up going a few minutes over. Please stick around. There are a few more questions. So this question has also been in the chat for a while. Natalie, it's from Abigail Kosanuke. She says, "Hi, Natalie. First of all, thank you for sharing your work." And she says that, "I am curious about how you work through these different series. Do you work on one series at a time? How do you know when a series is done? How do you get inspired to start a new series? And do you start working right away, or do you ponder it for a while?"
Kind of all of the above, but Joe and I kind of talked about this because we were talking earlier this week about like when you know when something's done, and that's when you are sick of making it, or like, or you feel like you're kind of mass producing your own work. I think that's a bad way of being. And I've kind of fallen into this too. I've like said yes to some shows that I knew I needed to like I knew I needed more work for, so therefore I like felt like I was making work for the show, like making more of a series for a show. I just don't think that's like a very good place to be in terms of making work. I think that when you're like what I was talking about earlier, when you're making something that you're just so excited to go to the studio and make, that is the best feeling. And that makes for the best work, I think. Like this house coat over here, I was like so excited every day to be like, I'm gonna go and like work on it more. I'm gonna like bring it home and work on it there. You know, like that's a good place to be. And once you fall out of that, it's probably time to do something else. You know?
If I'm remembering correctly, the house coat that is currently in the show here in the mill took you 2 or 3 weeks to make, right?
Yeah, maybe less. I kind of like busted it out, but that's because, yeah, so I spent probably a year thinking about making house coats. And then that first one took probably a month or two to make, just because I was like, how do you do this? I don't know. Like how does this like physically work? And then I like to work I like to make a lot in a series, obviously. So I knew I wanted to make, I don't know, at least a handful or more of these house coats and have kind of like a whole body of them, a whole kind of like army of them. So once I get to that place, then if I continue to make them, I'm like pushing the idea a little further. And like, I think that they get stronger. Well, sometimes they get stronger, sometimes they don't, in my own opinion. But yeah, so I usually work through ideas as I'm making the work. And sometimes I hold back from showing it to the world or to other people so that I can figure out what it is I'm doing. You know, I think that's good advice actually. And I don't always follow this advice, but I think it's good to like work through the what you're making to where you really understand it yourself before you're able to like invite people into your studio and talk about it or put it out to the world for them to write about or whatever, or like say someone interviews you and you want to make sure you know what you're talking about, which I feel like in a way these house coats, like I'm not quite even there yet. I'm just I'm like I kind of know, but I haven't worked it out fully in my head. So that's why this has been I like am accepting your feedback and your thoughts on just like house coats in general or what this work means to you. Because so yeah, sounds like I don't always practice what I preach, but hopefully that was helpful.
Thanks, Natalie. We have had a couple of people with their hands raised for a while. Whitney Hockman in particular has had their hand raised for quite a while now. Feel free to take yourself off mute and ask your question.
Hi, Natalie.
How's it going?
It's going good. So I work in the apparel industry, And when you were talking about loungewear, how that's increased in the pandemic, that's made me think about how at work we're selling a lot more loungewear, but people aren't really focused on color. They're just focused on comfort. So a lot of the things we're selling are black and gray, and it kind of makes me sad because you can stay home and wear whatever you want, but people just kind of want to wear dull colors. So the house coats made me really happy because of the really bright textiles and fringe. But at the same time, in the photos where you're wearing them, they feel very soft and very human. So my question is about when you're presenting them, is there a goal to make them seem human and wearable? And what are some of the challenges that come with presenting them?
Yeah, I'm like literally working through that right now. So that's a good question. Because I first imagined them as a full closet of giant hangers and having these house coats on these different hangers. And this was pre-COVID that I was envisioning this, like maybe people go and put them on and like there's a mirror and you're kind of, that's was like my original idea. But then I didn't like how flat it portrayed on that hanger that I had that first one on. And I really liked that kind of bodily thing, but putting it on a dress form like that I have at Wasaic, it does, I feel like it reads more as kind of more fashion or like clothing versus sculptural. So I want to find some kind of meat, and I'm open to suggestions if anybody has ideas. Maybe even like a plastic piece inside that's kind of hidden by the coat itself, and then sort of I'm thinking maybe like suspended, so it takes on that bodily aspect, but maybe also kind of has this like hanging from the kind of ghostly aspect to it. I don't know. I need to just play around and see what it looks like. But yeah, I don't, or I've even thought like today when I was taking photos of this new one, it'd be so fun I used to do video work. It'd be so fun to like incorporate them into some kind of video piece. I don't know. So my mind's kind of like figuring that out right now. But yeah, that's interesting about the apparel, like people buying grays and blacks. I think like thinking about it, like I've done that also recently. Pandemic, maybe.
Thank you, Natalie. Elise Drake has also had a hand raised for quite a while, so feel free to take yourself off mute and ask your question.
Hi, Elise.
Hey, my question is about labels and identity and framing. So, do you ever feel like mislabeled as a fiber artist or as a woman artist rather than a sculptor or just an artist without women added in? And do you ever find yourself like when people misframe you as like, oh, well, you could sell your work on Etsy, in that lens? And as like a craft person, like there's a huge difference between those two worlds that I think you're between, or I see you as just like as an artist, as a sculptor, and with that serious lens, especially because you have your master's, but people are framing you in the wrong way. And I was also curious what motivates you most, and like what is your big goal for your life?
So okay, the craft question. Yes, I think about that all the time. But like when I first started working in fiber, which was that gun series, was my first series that I started working in fabric. So I didn't do any fabric work in graduate school or undergrad. It was more kind of like this idea like lended itself to be in fabric. So therefore I was like, okay, I'm gonna try this. And also I'd learned to quilt and sew from my grandmother. Anyway, so I was very cautious at first of like, because I was making these literally like pillows, soft sculptures, I was very cautious of context for that work, because exactly what you said, like these could be on Etsy for, like somebody, they could easily be on Etsy and be like a whole different ball game. But I wanted to make sure that they were displayed in like a gallery in the art context, because we read work differently in different contexts like that. And I had a lot more meaning behind that work than selling it on Etsy. But also like the fact that I'm so cautious of that craft art like line. Now I'm learning to kind of embrace that craft. Actually, Roxanne's on here. We talk about this a lot because she does ceramic stuff, because that's also like a ceramic problem. But yeah, I'm learning to like kind of embrace that more and kind of play with that to my advantage. But yes, I've been in a lot of shows that are like women's work shows, or like whatever, fiber shows, and I do I don't usually call myself a fiber artist. I say I'm an artist because I feel like I'm just happen to be working in fiber, and maybe I keep thinking I'm gonna like do something else, but I keep sticking around in fabric world because it's really fun.
I get it.
Yeah, but and then what was your second question?
Oh, like what motivates you most? Like, what's your biggest goal?
Oh, I feel like I am like living the goal. Like I get to like make art all day. That's so amazing. How did I get to do that? I don't even know. Like that's, I mean, I of course have like, I'd like to show in, you know, a bigger institution or a bigger museum or whatever, but also when it comes down to it, like I'm make art for a living. Like that is awesome. That's, I get to do what I want to do all day. Like how lucky am I? And I feel like the pandemic has made that even more clear as people are like, I don't know, I just hear a lot of my friends just like complaining about their jobs and stuff, and I'm like, wow, I live this kind of like vicarious um financial life, but like also it's so awesome. So I just want to keep doing this. I want to keep that's my goal.
Thank you.
Thanks, Natalie. We have just a couple more questions from the chat, and then we will wrap up. So David Diamond had a question from a while back. He said that I noticed that the guns are smaller than real life and the house coat is larger than life, as are the blue ribbons. Do you have any comments on the scale of the work, and is that conscious?
Also, David Diamond gave me some, him and his wife dropped off some fabric from that I ended up using in the house coat that's at the Wasay project. So thank you. So the gun, some of them are smaller, but some of them are, I think that they kind of run the gamut of scale, because some of them are like, I have like a 7-foot one. I didn't really pay attention to scale that much with that series. Maybe some of them are kind of gun-like shape, gun-like size. But for the house coat and the ribbons, I kind of like, I liked the ridiculousness of them being so large. And again, that house coat kind of like how it would swallow a regular size human. And maybe that's partially coming back to that like craft versus art conversation. Maybe that was partially because I wanted to make sure that people read it as sculptural and not as like an actual coat that someone would wear. But also I liked that they're kind of like larger than life, or like oversized. Yeah, like consuming you, but also maybe kind of like drowning you. If that makes sense.
Great, thank you. Just one more question. Anna MQN said that I love all the sparkle and glitter in your work. What got you interested in using those flashy materials?
I guess I usually just like go to a fabric store and like, okay, well actually that's not true. In the beginning with the gun sculptures, I was really trying to use the flashiest, like least masculine fabrics that I could find. So the things that are drastically different than a hard metal object. So that was like uh sequins and fringe and floral fabrics. And then I sort of began to collect fabric, and once you start working in fabric, you like end up obsessively buying more, and people give you more, and it's amazing, and you become like kind of a fabric hoarder. So then I just was sort of drawn to those materials. But yeah, what makes me drawn to them? I like also that a lot of the materials that I get that you could find at like a Joann's Fabric or like a craft store or a Michael's, or a lot of times I'll go when we would used to travel more, like go whatever town we were in, go to the local quilt shop or the fabric shop and like buy stuff that's like readily available to anybody, or the garment district when I bet the garment district's back open again in some way, but I haven't been. But yeah, so flashy. Also, it's just fun. It's like it makes you happy. It makes people smile, which plays into that whole like humor and entering with this like comedic element.
Thanks so much, Natalie. I want to be mindful of the time. It is 6:12. We've gone a little bit over. Thank you, everyone who has stuck around. This has been our first featured artist talk with Natalie Baxter. If you want to see the work that is in the show that Natalie talked about, the show is up through March 27th. If I'm not mistaken, we still have 6 appointment slots available for this weekend. The show is on view by appointment only. We're taking groups of up to 10 people. One group is allowed at a time through the mill. So we're taking a lot of COVID precautions, and yeah, it's also on view every Saturday through March 27th. I also should note that Natalie has some works from the show and some work in general that is on sale at our website. There is just a store on our website where you can purchase some of the work that is in the show. And then we also have a holiday sale that is up through February 1st, where there are a few of Natalie's warm gun sculptures left for sale. I should also note that I've said a few times that this is just the first artist talk. We have 4 more coming up in the coming weeks. So on January 27th, we are doing a talk with Ashley Epps. On February 12th with Liz Nielsen, February 26th with Mark Floridor, and on March 12th with Jamia Richmond Edwards. I hope that you all can attend those as well. What else do I have on my list? We are also producing a publication for All Out All In. Natalie referenced that her and I were talking the other day. That was because I was interviewing her for that publication. We're putting together, in case you can't make it to WSAIC, we're going to be putting together a cheap publication on newsprint. It'll just cost, I don't know, $5 to $10-ish, with photos of all the work in the show and interviews with all of the artists in the show. So keep an eye out for that. This is actually the first time we've announced that, so you guys are the first to hear that. All that's left is to say thank you. Thank you so much to Natalie for taking the time to talk, and thank you for everyone for attending.
Yeah, thank you, everybody, and thank you for your great questions. Also, can I save all these chats? How do you do that?
Yes, I have saved the chat on my end, so all of these nice messages that people have sent about your work that I didn't have time to read to you, you can see after the call.
Yeah, thank you, everybody, for all of your comments and your questions, and for showing up. Have a good weekend.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Bye.